My boyfriend posted, "A real woman isn't insecure about her man having female friends." I commented, "Facts." The next day, I took one photo with his male trainer. He had absolutely no idea that one picture was about to destroy every lie he'd been living behind. My name is Claire Bannett, and up until a few months ago, I thought I was the kind of woman who could tell the difference between love and being used. I was wrong. At 32, my life looked stable from the outside. I worked in data security for a large corporation, owned a downtown condo, paid my bills on time, and had the kind of routine people call settled when they mean safe. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Or at least I thought it was. For 4 years, I was with Ethan Carter. He was 29, charming in that effortless way that made people forgive him before he even apologized. And for the last 3 years, he had been living with me. The condo was mine. So were the mortgage, the bills, the insurance, and even the SUV Ethan drove every day. Ethan worked part-time at an upscale clothing boutique. His paycheck usually disappeared into designer sneakers, expensive coffee, weekend brunches, and little things he liked to call self-care. I never kept score emotionally. If Ethan forgot to pay me back or contributed less than he should have, I let it go. But financially, I still kept receipts and paperwork because that's how I'd always managed my life. Whenever friends raised their eyebrows and asked whether he was contributing, I laughed it off. "He'll get there," I'd say. "We're building something." The embarrassing part is I meant it. I didn't realize I was the only one building until another woman moved into our relationship without ever needing a key. Her name was Olivia. At first, she was just a coworker from the boutique. Then Ethan started mentioning her at dinner. A funny customer Olivia had dealt with. A movie Olivia hated. A drink Olivia wanted to try. A rough day Olivia needed to talk through. It was harmless, I told myself. None of that sounded unreasonable. I wanted to believe I was simply overthinking it. But her name started showing up everywhere, in the middle of our meals, on his phone after midnight, in the excuses for why he was late, why plans changed, why he needed space, why he seemed half present even when he was sitting right across from me. His phone would light up at 11:30, and before he even read the message, his mouth would twitch like he already knew it would make him smile. "Who is it?" I asked once. He tilted the screen away from me. "Just Olivia." Just Olivia became the phrase he used whenever he didn't want to explain anything. The first real conversation happened on a Sunday afternoon while we were folding laundry in the bedroom. It was quiet outside, the kind of sleepy weekend silence that should have made honesty easier. "I need to say something," I told him. He shook out a towel. "Okay. I've been feeling uncomfortable about you and Olivia." His hands paused for the briefest moment before he kept folding the towel, but it was enough for me to notice. "What about us?" The word us landed badly, but I tried not to react. The late messages, the drinks after work, the way she comes up in almost every conversation. It feels like there aren't many boundaries anymore. Ethan gave a short laugh, more insulted than amused. "So now I'm not allowed to have female friends?" "That's not what I said." "It's what you mean." "No, Ethan, I mean boundaries, that's all." He folded the towel with exaggerated care, smoothing the corners like the linen had personally offended him. "Claire, do you hear yourself?" I hated that sentence immediately. "I'm telling you how I feel, and I'm telling you it sounds controlling." That word hit harder than I expected. Controlling. I had paid his bills, bought his groceries, helped keep his life comfortable, and somehow I was the one being framed as too demanding because I asked why another woman was texting him goodnight. Still, I softened. "I'm not trying to control you." "Then trust me." "I do." "No, you don't. If you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation." By the end of it, I was apologizing. That became the pattern. If I asked why Olivia needed him after midnight, I was reading too much into things. If I asked whether I could come along sometime, I was making it weird. If I said I missed feeling like his partner instead of the woman waiting at home, he told me I was creating drama where none existed. And every time he ended with the same gentle, patronizing tone. "I just don't want you turning into one of those jealous girlfriends." So I learned to swallow it. Not because I believed him. Because peace was easier than trying to prove I wasn't crazy. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I was eating breakfast between meetings when my phone buzzed. Someone had tagged Ethan in a photo, and for reasons I still can't explain, I opened it right away. There he was at a brunch cafe I recognized because I had paid for it more than once. Avocado toast, iced coffee, a table full of coworkers. And the caption, "A real woman isn't insecure about her man having female friends. She trusts him. If you can't handle his friendships, maybe you're just not mature enough for a relationship." He hadn't tagged me. He didn't need to. Everyone who knew us knew exactly who that little speech was aimed at. The comments were worse. People laughing. Women agreeing. Men applauding him for setting boundaries. A few mutual friends dropped heart emojis like they weren't watching a man publicly humiliate the woman who paid for the car he drove to that brunch. I sat there with my coffee going cold, waiting for the hurt to arrive in the usual way. It didn't. Something inside me settled into a strange kind of clarity. I wasn't numb anymore. I was simply done arguing with reality. I typed one word. Facts. Ethan liked my comment within 30 seconds. I actually laughed under my breath. He took my comment as surrender, convinced I had finally accepted his version of the story. What he didn't know was that I was done arguing inside a game where he controlled all the rules. Because Ethan had forgotten one very important thing. For the past year, I had been paying for his personal training sessions at a gym across town. His trainer's name was Nathan. Nathan was professional, polite, and completely unaware that Ethan had been using him as part of this little public performance about trust, insecurity, and female friends. So an hour after I commented facts, I opened my laptop and wrote an email. Hi, Nathan. This might sound unusual, but I'd like to book a private training session tomorrow afternoon. I also have a small professional favor to ask. I'll compensate you for your time beyond your normal rate. I reread it twice, wondering when my life had become strange enough that emailing my boyfriend's trainer felt like the sanest thing I could do. Then I sent it. 10 minutes later, Nathan replied. Tomorrow at 4 works. I found myself staring at his reply for a while before I even realized I hadn't blinked. For months, I had been asking Ethan for honesty and receiving lectures instead. Now, one polite email from someone I barely knew felt more straightforward than anything inside my own relationship. The next afternoon, I walked into the gym with my stomach tight and my face arranged into something close to normal. Nathan greeted me near the front desk. Claire, good to see you, he said, offering his hand. Your email sounded mysterious. It probably sounded worse than it is. That depends. Am I being asked to join a pyramid scheme? The joke caught me off guard, and I laughed despite myself. No, nothing that illegal. We sat in a quiet corner near the weight room where the afternoon crowd hadn't arrived yet. Music played low through the speakers. Somewhere behind us, metal clanged against rubber flooring. I chose my words carefully. My relationship with Ethan is ending, I said. Or at least I think it is. Yesterday he posted something online implying I'm insecure because I've been uncomfortable about his relationship with a female coworker. Nathan's expression shifted. Not shock. Recognition. The coworker he's always talking about? My skin prickled. So he talks about her here too. Nathan leaned back, rubbing a hand along his jaw. Ethan talks a lot. I had a feeling he realized he'd said more than he intended. What does he say? I try not to get involved in clients' personal lives. I understand. But since you're sitting here, and since he's apparently making you look bad online... He paused, choosing the line carefully. He's mentioned you being controlling, more than once. The word didn't sting the way it used to. Now it sounded rehearsed. Did you believe him? Nathan didn't answer right away. I thought it was odd, he said. The few times I met you, you seemed normal. Tired, maybe, but not controlling. A laugh slipped out of me, small and dry. Tired is accurate. So what's the favor? I want to book a real session. We train. Nothing fake, nothing inappropriate. Afterward, I'd like one photo with you. Trainer and client, that's all. Nathan studied me for a beat. You want him to see how it feels. I want him to hear his own logic from the other side. That made him smile a little, though not cruelly. I'll do it, he said. But I want to be clear about something. If this turns into a jealousy game, I'm out. Fair enough. Good, he said. I don't do relationship drama. I train clients, that's it. Somehow that made me trust him more. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're still getting the actual workout. He wasn't kidding. 40 minutes later, I was sweating through exercises I didn't know had names, questioning every emotional decision that had led me to a treadmill, a mat, and a man cheerfully telling me my form was almost there, which I suspected meant terrible but fixable. And strangely, it helped. Nathan didn't flirt. He didn't use my vulnerability as an invitation. Most of the session was exactly what you'd expect. Exercise, small talk, a few terrible jokes about how weak my core was. That normalcy mattered more than I expected. At the end of the session, sunlight poured through the tall windows near the free weights. Nathan took my phone and snapped a few pictures while pretending to correct my bench press form. The best shot captured exactly what had happened, a trainer and his client finishing a workout. Anyone who wanted to see something else would have to invent it. I posted it before I could talk myself out of it. Trying something new. Finally booked a session with one of the best trainers in town. Thanks for the workout, Nathan. I tagged him. I tagged the gym. Then I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and drove home without checking it. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, the screen was lit up. 1 missed call. Then another. 3 messages from Ethan. Why were you with Nathan? Why didn't you tell me you booked a session with him? Call me, right now. I sat in the car, reading those messages while the engine ticked softly in the garage. The same man who had spent months preaching about trust had lasted less than an hour under his own philosophy. Before I even reached my front door, he commented publicly under the photo. Claire, what exactly is this? Inside the condo, I set my keys on the kitchen counter and replied where everyone could see it. Just following your advice. A real man shouldn't feel insecure about his girlfriend having male friends, right? Nathan's just my trainer. Please don't be paranoid. I locked my phone. When I set my phone down, the apartment felt strangely honest, as though pretending had finally become more exhausting than telling the truth. I walked into the guest room, pulled the moving boxes down from the closet shelf, and started unfolding them. The photo didn't change anything between us. It simply exposed what our relationship had already become. I packed his things carefully. Clothes folded, shoes paired, watches wrapped so they wouldn't scratch. That tenderness surprised me more than the anger ever had. You can stop trusting someone long before you stop remembering how much you once loved them. By the time I sealed the 6th box, I heard the Mazda pull into the garage. The sound used to mean he was home. That night, it meant the performance was over. The front door opened hard enough to hit the wall. Claire! I stepped into the hallway. I'm here. Ethan appeared at the guest room doorway with his phone still in his hand. His face was flushed, but not with guilt. What the hell was that picture? Which one? Don't do that. The one with Nathan? He's my trainer. The emphasis wasn't on Nathan. It was on the word my, as if meeting him somehow required Ethan's permission. I booked a session, I said. You met him behind my back. I did. That stopped him. He was ready for denial, apology, maybe tears. He didn't know what to do with honesty. You knew exactly how that would look. Yes. So you admit it? I wanted you to feel 5 minutes of what you expected me to live with for 6 months. His mouth tightened. That's childish. No, I said, moving aside so he could see the boxes behind me. What's childish is making rules for me that you never intended to follow yourself. His eyes shifted past my shoulder. At first, he looked confused. Then he saw his clothes stacked inside the open box. What is this? Your things. You packed my stuff? Yes. All of it? Everything I found. He walked into the room like the boxes might disappear if he got closer. My laptop? Wrapped. Your watches are padded, and your shoes are in the 2nd box by the wall. His voice dropped. You're breaking up with me over one picture? No, Ethan. I stayed where I was, my hands still faintly sticky from packing tape. I'm breaking up with you because you've been having an emotional affair with Olivia, and I don't believe it stopped there. A flicker crossed his face so quickly that most people would have missed it. I didn't. What are you talking about? 2 nights earlier, I'd borrowed his laptop to print a work document. Before I closed the browser, a hotel confirmation email had been sitting open on the screen. The reservation for this weekend, I said. 1 room, 2 adults. His grip tightened around his phone. He had always been good at talking, good enough to turn questions into accusations and lies into explanations before I even realized what had happened. But standing there with the boxes behind me and the hotel reservation between us, he had nothing ready. It's not what you think, he said. That's convenient. Olivia needed to get away. With you. We were going to talk. For 2 days in a hotel? He dragged both hands through his hair. You don't understand. She was going through stuff. And I was going through you lying to my face. His eyes flashed. Maybe I wouldn't have had to hide it if you hadn't been suspicious all the time. I recognized the pattern immediately. Somehow his decision had become my fault again. I almost admired the consistency. You booked a weekend away with another woman, I said, and somehow this is still my fault? You pushed me away. I asked for boundaries. You made me feel trapped. You lived in my condo, drove my car, used my money, and spent months telling me I was insecure every time I noticed the obvious. For the first time that evening, he didn't have an answer. Instead of answering, he turned toward the rain-streaked window. Outside, rain had started tapping against the windows, soft and steady, filling the space where his next excuse should have been. After a while, he picked up one of the boxes. I had labeled it neatly because apparently even heartbreak couldn't stop me from being organized. You really planned this. I didn't plan it, I said. I accepted it. He set the box back down. So that's it? Yes. I don't get another chance? You had chances. You just called them arguments. There wasn't much left for either of us to say after that. He didn't shout. I didn't cry. Not then. He stood in the room for a minute, scanning the folded clothes and sealed boxes, waiting for me to soften the way I always had. I didn't. When he finally grabbed an overnight bag and walked toward the front door, he paused with his hand near the knob. I'll cool off for a few days, he said. We can talk when you've had time to think. That sentence hurt in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't the thought of losing him that hurt. It was realizing he still believed I'd eventually give in, just as I always had before. I've had months to think. He stared at me. This time he heard it. The door closed behind him. I stood in the hallway until the garage opened, the Mazda started, and the sound of the engine faded into the rain. Only after that did I call a locksmith. Has someone broken in? The man asked. No, I said, looking at the door Ethan had just walked through. I'm making sure he can't. By a little after 9, the deadbolt was replaced, the smart lock was reprogrammed, and the garage keypad no longer answered to Ethan's code. When the locksmith handed me 2 new keys, he gave me the careful look strangers give women when they understand more than they ask. Hope the rest of your night gets better. I think it already is, I said. After he left, I leaned against the door and let myself fall apart. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to admit how tired I had been. The next morning, I expected messages. There were none. No apology, no explanation, no panic. That made sense once I thought about it. Ethan was waiting for the version of me who always came around. The Claire who apologized first. The Claire who paid the bill, smoothed the argument over, and convinced herself that love required patience, even when patience looked a lot like self-abandonment. The version of me who always apologized first wasn't coming back. I made coffee, opened every window in the condo, and finished packing the rest of his life out of mine. By lunchtime, the hallway was lined with boxes. His bathroom shelf was empty. His drawer in the kitchen was cleared. The hoodie he always left on the back of the chair was folded into a carton with the rest of his clothes. Walking back through the condo, I noticed how different it felt. Nothing dramatic had changed, yet the place finally felt like it belonged to me again. That afternoon, I started untangling the practical things. The phone plan came first. Ethan had been using a line on my family account for years, so I called customer service, verified my identity, and transferred his number to a prepaid SIM. So the number remains active, the representative explained, but billing responsibility changes immediately. Perfect. When the call ended, I placed the SIM card in an envelope and put it in my desk. If he wanted to keep his number, he could activate it himself. If he didn't, that was no longer my problem. The Mazda was next. That one should have been harder. It wasn't. The vehicle had always been registered solely under my name. I had bought it because his old car died, and I didn't want him struggling to get to work. At the time, I told myself it was what partners did. Now, sitting across from the dealership manager while he reviewed the paperwork, I saw it for what it had become. Another benefit Ethan had mistaken for entitlement. You're sure you want to sell? The manager asked. I've been sure for days. He glanced at the paperwork, then at me. Relationship situation? I gave a small laugh. Something like that. The offer was fair enough. Not amazing, not insulting. I signed the papers and handed over the keys. Watching the Mazda disappear behind the service bay doors felt less like revenge and more like returning something to its proper owner. Me. The shared household debit card took 5 minutes to close. 600 and change went back into my account. The banker asked whether I wanted to open a new one. No, I said. I don't need it anymore. By Friday evening, the condo no longer smelled like Ethan's cologne. I washed the bedding, cleaned the bathroom, wiped down the shelves, and moved the furniture just enough to stop seeing his outline in every room. Cleaning became its own kind of answer. Saturday night, just after 8, my phone buzzed from an unfamiliar number. My phone stopped working. What did you do? I read it once and set the phone down. Another message arrived. My key doesn't work either. Open the door. The doorbell rang before I reached the hallway. Slow at first, then harder, then again and again. Through the peephole, Ethan stood outside with an overnight bag slung over his shoulder, his face tight with the kind of anger people wear when reality surprises them. I opened the door only a few inches. What happened to my key? He demanded. I changed the locks. You actually did it. Yes. My phone's disconnected. Transferred, not disconnected. You had no right. We're not together anymore. You don't erase someone overnight. I didn't. I opened the door, just enough for him to see the stacked boxes behind me. I spent 3 days packing your belongings. His anger faltered. My laptop? Wrapped. My guitar? In its case. My clothes? Folded. He stared past me, and I watched the truth hit him in stages. There was nothing left waiting for him inside that condo. Not his keys, not his routines, not the life he'd assumed would always be there. His voice came out smaller. So where am I supposed to go? I thought about Olivia. I thought about the hotel reservation. I thought about every time he had told me she was just a friend. That sounds like a question for the woman you were planning to spend the weekend with. For once, Ethan had no answer. Ethan left my doorway with his overnight bag still hanging from one shoulder, and the look of a man who had just discovered consequences were not a temporary inconvenience. I watched him walk away through the small gap in the door. He didn't slam anything this time. He didn't call me crazy. He didn't throw another line about trust or maturity or how I was overreacting. He simply walked to the end of the hallway, stopped once like he expected me to change my mind, and kept going when I didn't. That should have been the end of it. I wanted it to be. By Sunday morning, the condo felt quieter than it ever had, but not in a lonely way. The boxes were still stacked near the entrance, a cardboard wall between the life I had lived and the one I was trying to reclaim. I made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, and opened my laptop to finish work I had ignored all week. Every now and then, my eyes moved toward the hallway. Missing Ethan wasn't the reason. Some part of me had simply been trained to wait for the next problem. By Monday, the waiting annoyed me enough to act. I sent him one final message from a number he hadn't blocked. You have 48 hours to collect the remaining boxes. After that, I'll place everything in a storage unit. I'll pay the first month. Anything after that will be your responsibility. There was nothing emotional about the message, just a deadline and clear instructions. He didn't respond until evening. I'll come tomorrow afternoon. That was it. 5 words, and somehow I could hear the resentment behind every one of them. The next day, a rented moving van pulled into the parking area outside my condo. I was standing by the living room window when Ethan climbed out of the passenger side. Olivia was driving. Seeing them together did not shock me. Maybe that was the saddest part. A month earlier, I might have felt my knees weaken. That afternoon, I only noticed how awkward they looked. Not romantic, not triumphant, awkward. Olivia stayed near the van with sunglasses covering half her face, although the sky was cloudy and the parking lot was shaded. Ethan walked toward my door alone, shoulders tense, jaw set, performing calm so badly that I almost felt embarrassed for him. I opened the door before he knocked. The boxes are by the entrance, I said. His eyes flicked past me. Okay. He stepped inside like a guest who knew he had overstayed by years. Olivia followed only as far as the threshold, then seemed to think better of it and turned back toward the van. I didn't blame her. There was no comfortable way to stand inside another woman's home and help carry out the belongings of the man who had lied to both of us in different ways. Ethan picked up the first box. The label read winter jackets in black marker. He paused when he saw it. You labeled everything? It made sense. He gave a humorless little laugh. Of course it did. I didn't answer. There was nothing useful left to say. Over the next hour, he carried the rest of his life out of my condo, one quiet trip at a time. I stopped paying attention to what was inside each box. Watching him leave mattered more than counting what was gone. Olivia helped only when the boxes were light. She never looked directly at me. Whenever Ethan came close to her, she busied herself rearranging things inside the van. The silence between them told me more than any confession could have. Whatever thrill they had built in secret had not survived the inconvenience of real life. Halfway through, Ethan stopped in the living room. It looks different, he said. I followed his gaze. For once, he wasn't wrong. The condo really did feel different. I had washed the windows, moved the sofa closer to the light, donated the recliner he loved because it let him nap through every movie we tried to watch together. Without his shoes near the door and his charging cables across the floor, the place felt less decorated and more awake. It is different, I said. He ran his thumb along the edge of a box. I didn't think you'd really do all this. I know. That was all I gave him. He wanted a conversation. I could feel it. Some final argument where he could still find a way to make my calmness look cruel. But the house had already answered for me. Empty shelves, changed locks, sold car, closed accounts. There was nothing left to debate. When the last box was loaded, Ethan stood by the open back of the van with the keys in his hand. Take care of yourself, Claire. It was the first gentle thing he had said in days, and even that sounded like something he had borrowed from a movie. You too. Olivia started the engine before he had fully closed the passenger door. They drove away without looking back. I shut the condo door and waited for grief to rush in. What surprised me was that relief arrived before grief ever had a chance. The relief settled over me so quietly that it almost felt unfamiliar. I had spent so long bracing myself for collapse that I didn't recognize peace when it arrived without asking permission. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was eating lunch at work. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something about it made me swipe to answer. Claire Bennett? Yes. This is Richard Carter, Ethan's father. I pushed my office door closed with my foot. Richard, I hope you have a good explanation, he said. No hello, no warmth. My son tells me you've destroyed his life. There it was, the family version. I'm sure he does. He said you threw him out, sold the car he depended on, shut off his phone, and left him with nowhere to go. He left out the hotel reservation. The line went quiet. Good. What hotel reservation? Richard asked, but his voice had changed. The one he booked for himself and Olivia while he was still living in my condo. A chair creaked on his end. He told us she was a coworker. She is. That doesn't mean... No, I said, keeping my voice even. It doesn't. The lying did. He exhaled through his nose, sharp and impatient. Ethan says nothing happened. Maybe nothing did. That answer seemed to surprise him. But he lied every day, I continued. He made me feel unstable for noticing what he was hiding. At some point, whether they slept together became the least important part. Richard didn't respond right away. I could picture him sitting somewhere with Ethan's version of the story in one hand and the first real crack in it forming in the other. "You still shouldn't have sold the car," he said at last. "It was titled in my name. He needed it for work. I needed honesty in my own home." "That sounds very convenient." "What part?" "The paperwork, the accounts, the way you handled everything so quickly." A bitter laugh almost escaped me, but I held it back. "Richard, I handled everything quickly because I had been handling everything for years." He didn't like that. "A relationship requires compromise." "I agree." "Then why couldn't you compromise?" "I did. I compromised until my boundaries became suggestions and his lies became my responsibility." The call cooled after that. Not because he believed me, because he realized I wasn't going to beg him to. When we hung up, I sat alone in my office for a while with my lunch untouched, staring at the phone on my desk. That conversation should have warned me. It didn't. I thought Richard would speak to Ethan, maybe ask a few uncomfortable questions, maybe quietly decide not to involve himself any further. Instead, the next Monday, a thick, certified envelope arrived at my office. My assistant dropped it on my desk with a curious look. "Legal looking," she said. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. The words at the top made the room feel smaller. "Notice of civil claim. Ethan was suing me. Not for heartbreak, not for emotional distress. For property. Property he claimed I had stolen, withheld, or disposed of after our breakup. I read the list once, certain I had misunderstood it. A stand mixer I had purchased 2 Christmases earlier because I wanted to learn baking during winter. A designer floor lamp I had ordered when we redecorated the living room. Several luxury items that I had personally watched him load into the moving van. And at the bottom of the page, the lie that made my hands go cold, a pair of family heirloom diamond earrings. According to the claim, he had left them at my condo, and I had refused to return them. I had never seen those earrings. Not in a drawer, not in a jewelry box, not in a family photo, not once in 4 years. The lawsuit was not confused. It was not exaggerated. It was fiction with a filing fee. For a few minutes, I sat perfectly still. Then something inside me sharpened. Ethan had lied to friends. He had lied to his family. He had lied online. Now he was trying it in court. I called the attorney our company occasionally used for contract disputes. He answered on the 3rd ring, distracted and polite, until I said the words, "I think my ex-boyfriend is suing me over things that never existed." His tone changed immediately. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about Olivia, the Instagram post, Nathan's training session, the hotel reservation, the boxes, the locks, the phone transfer, the car sale, the final pickup with Olivia driving the van, the certified envelope sitting on my desk. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did you keep records?" I looked around my office at the filing cabinet, the folders, the receipts I had always been mocked for saving. "Yes." "Everything?" "Pretty much." "Good," he said. "People can write anything on a claim form. Winning requires proof." That night, my dining table turned into a command center. I pulled the condo deed, mortgage statements, utility bills, car title, insurance records, loan documents, bill of sale, bank statements, credit card receipts, email confirmations, delivery records, phone transfer details, and every photo I had taken while packing Ethan's things. The stack grew much faster than I remembered. At the time, I had photographed the boxes only because I wanted proof nothing had been damaged. I had snapped pictures of the van because it felt safer to document what left my home. Now those photos looked less like caution and more like protection I hadn't known I would need. One photo clearly showed Ethan carrying a box marked kitchen. Another showed the lamp wrapped in moving blankets near the van's back door. Several showed the luxury bags he claimed I kept, sitting inside the cargo area beside Olivia's purse. The earrings were the only item with nothing. No image, no receipt, no appraisal, no insurance record, no proof they had ever been in my home. By midnight, the table had disappeared under paper. I poured a glass of water, stood there in my bare feet, and stared at the folders. A strange calm settled over me. Ethan had always been better at telling stories. But this time I had evidence. The 4 months before the hearing passed slowly. Not because my life stopped. It didn't. I went to work. I went to therapy. I saw friends. I learned how to sit alone in my own condo without reaching for my phone every time the room became quiet. Some days I missed the version of Ethan I had loved. Other days I was furious that I had loved a version that may never have existed. Both feelings were true. Healing, I learned, is not elegant. It is eating dinner over the sink one night and laughing with friends the next. It is crying because you found an old receipt in a coat pocket, then throwing that receipt away and realizing your hands are steady. It is not becoming a new person overnight. It is slowly returning to yourself with fewer apologies. The lawsuit stayed in the background like weather, always there, always waiting. My attorney helped me organize the binder until it became almost ridiculous in its precision. Tabs, copies, dates, notes. Each claim had its own section. Each section had documents attached. The day before court, he tapped the binder with 2 fingers. "Don't over-explain," he said. "Answer only what's asked. Let the paperwork do the heavy lifting." I'm not exactly excited to see him again. You don't need to be excited, just be prepared. I am. I know, he said. That's why I'm not worried. The courthouse looked uglier than I expected. Too much beige, too many fluorescent lights, too many people sitting with folders on their laps, waiting for strangers to decide what pieces of their lives mattered legally. I arrived early and sat on a bench outside the courtroom with the binder resting against my knees. When Ethan walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner. Not dramatically, but enough. His shirt was wrinkled under his jacket, and his hair had the overworked look of someone who had spent too much time trying to appear fine. Richard came with him, carrying a folder that looked thin enough to be a bad sign. Olivia followed a few steps behind. She looked miserable. Oddly enough, Olivia's expression caught my attention more than Ethan himself. In every version of this story I had tortured myself with months earlier, Olivia had been smug, triumphant, the woman who got what she wanted. But standing under those courthouse lights, she looked like someone who had been dragged into a mess that had stopped being exciting once there were consequences. Ethan noticed me first. His eyes moved to the binder. His face tightened. A clerk opened the door and called our case. Inside, the judge was an older woman with a calm face and the posture of someone who had no patience for theatrics. She reviewed the paperwork, adjusted her glasses, and turned to Ethan. "Mr. Carter, you filed the claim. Tell me why we're here." Ethan stood. For a few seconds, he almost sounded like the man who used to charm waiters into free dessert. He said I had become jealous of his friendship with Olivia. He said I humiliated him online by posting a picture with Nathan. He said I threw him out in anger, sold his vehicle, cut off his phone, and refused to return property that belonged to him. He delivered the story with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed it many times. Listening to it, I realized how many times he must have practiced. When he finished, the judge looked at me. "Ms. Bennett?" I stood with the binder in both hands. "Your Honor, I have documents responding to each item individually." The clerk collected the copies. I opened to the first tab. The condo was and remains solely mine. The deed, mortgage records, utility bills, and insurance statements are under tab 1. Mr. Carter was not listed as an owner, tenant, or payer on any household account. The judge turned the pages. Ethan shifted beside Richard. "The stand mixer he listed was purchased on my credit card. The receipt is under tab 2. Another page. The floor lamp was also purchased by me. Tab 3 includes the order confirmation, payment record, and delivery confirmation to my address." The judge glanced up briefly, then continued reading. "The vehicle was titled, financed, registered, and insured only in my name. Those documents are under tabs 4 through 7, along with the bill of sale." She turned toward Ethan. "Mr. Carter, were you ever listed on the title?" His answer came out low. "No." "Did you make the loan payments?" "No." "Insurance?" "No, Your Honor." The courtroom air changed. The atmosphere shifted almost immediately. I continued. "The luxury items he claims I kept are visible in these photographs taken during the pickup. They show the items inside the moving van he and Olivia used." I handed over the printed photos. Ethan looked at them and said nothing. "Photos don't prove every item was returned," he muttered. "No," I said. "That's why each photo has a timestamp, and the pickup date matches the moving van rental record." The judge looked down at the documents again. "Understood." Richard leaned closer, his jaw tightening with every image. He studied the photos longer than he needed to. The confidence he had walked in with began to drain from his face. For the first time that morning, he stopped looking at me like the problem and started looking at his son. The judge studied each page. "These are time-stamped?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And taken on the day he collected his property?" "Yes." She placed them beside the claim. That left the earrings. I had been waiting for that part. "The final item listed is a pair of family heirloom diamond earrings," I said. "I have never seen them. I was not aware they existed until I received this claim." The judge turned to Ethan. "Do you have documentation for the earrings? Appraisal, insurance policy, photographs, anything establishing ownership or value?" Ethan swallowed. "No." "Any witness who can confirm they were left at Ms. Bennett's residence?" He looked toward Richard. Richard did not look back. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. "No." The judge set her pen down. "Mr. Carter, the burden of proof is yours." So far, the documented evidence shows the property either belonged to Ms. Bennett or left her residence with you. Ethan's face reddened. It wasn't that simple. It rarely is, the judge said. But this is a property claim, not a relationship review. That line nearly ended him. Olivia stared at the floor. Richard closed his folder. I could have stopped there. I probably should have. But there was one piece of context I wanted on the record. Not because I needed revenge, but because Ethan's entire claim rested on the idea that I had acted irrationally out of jealousy. Your Honor, may I submit one additional exhibit? The judge looked at me over her glasses. What is it? Screenshots showing the public post Mr. Carter made about trust and close friendships, followed by his public response to my professional photo with a trainer hours later. The clerk took them. The judge read the first screenshot, then the second. Her face did not change much, but her eyebrows moved slightly. That was enough. She placed the screenshots on top of the file. I understand the context. Ethan muttered something under his breath. The judge heard it. Mr. Carter, I strongly suggest you not speak unless you're answering a question. He went quiet. She reviewed the documents one last time. Nobody spoke while the judge reviewed the final pages. Based on the evidence presented, she said, the court finds no factual basis for the plaintiff's claims. The documentary record overwhelmingly supports the defendant's position. She looked directly at Ethan. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel came down. Not loudly. It didn't need to be. Ethan had built his last lie on paper, and paper had answered back. The crack of the judge's gavel echoed for only a second, but it carried 4 months of stress out of my body. No dramatic celebration followed, no triumphant speech. Courtrooms rarely work that way. Chairs scraped lightly across the courtroom floor as people quietly packed their files. My attorney had warned me that winning would probably feel quieter than I expected. He was right. I closed my binder, slid the final tab into place, and thanked the clerk before stepping into the hallway. I had almost reached the exit when raised voices stopped me. Richard wasn't trying to whisper. I asked you 3 different times if every word in that filing was true. Ethan answered too quickly. I thought it was. Richard stared at him. No, you hoped it was. That's not the same thing. Olivia folded her arms, exhaustion written across her face. I told you this would blow up. Ethan swung toward her. You said she'd probably settle. I said she might. I never said she'd walk into court with enough paperwork to answer every claim. Richard let out a long breath, rubbing his forehead. You dragged us into this. I was trying to get back what was mine. What was yours? Richard asked quietly. The condo? No. The car? No. The phone? No. So what exactly were you trying to get back? Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For months he had blamed me. Then Olivia. Then circumstances. Standing in that courthouse hallway, there was no one left to shift the responsibility onto. Only then did they notice I was still there. Our eyes met. The anger that had once fueled every conversation between us had burned itself out somewhere along the way. He took one hesitant step toward me. Claire. His voice sounded unfamiliar. Smaller. The apology never came. Maybe he couldn't find it. Maybe he didn't know where to begin. I spared him the effort. I gave him a small nod. Not because everything was forgiven. Not because I believed the past could be erased. Simply because I no longer needed anything from him. Then I walked away. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the courthouse steps. I sat in my car without starting the engine. The binder rested on the passenger seat where Ethan used to sit. I looked at it for a long moment before laughing softly to myself. Months earlier, I had believed the biggest victory would be proving I wasn't the villain he had painted me to be. Winning the case wasn't what stayed with me. What mattered was realizing I no longer needed Ethan to understand why he had lost me. Because I finally did. Life settled into an ordinary rhythm after that. And ordinary turned out to be exactly what I had been craving. The guest room became my home office. The oversized recliner Ethan insisted on keeping disappeared, replaced by a reading chair beside the window. I filled the condo with plants that actually survived because no one complained about too much greenery. Nothing about the condo had physically changed, yet every room somehow felt lighter. Funny how much difference that made. Work became easier once I stopped carrying emotional exhaustion into every morning meeting. Friends noticed it before I did. You smile more now, one of them said over dinner. I guess I do. You don't check your phone every 5 minutes anymore either. I hadn't realized that habit was gone. Apparently, healing leaves little clues long before it announces itself. Therapy helped too. Not because the therapist told me what Ethan had done wrong. I already knew that. She helped me understand something harder. People who constantly make you question your own reality don't usually do it all at once. With time, I realized I couldn't point to one dramatic moment when I lost confidence in myself. I didn't lose confidence overnight. It faded so gradually that I barely noticed. Getting it back happened the same way. That lesson stayed with me far longer than the breakup itself. A few weeks after the hearing, mutual friends quietly filled in the parts of Ethan's story I hadn't cared enough to ask about. He and Olivia didn't stay together much longer. Once the secrecy was gone, whatever they had built started looking a lot less romantic. Real life brought bills, schedules, arguments, and expectations neither of them seemed ready to handle. Eventually, from what I heard, Olivia left too. When someone mentioned it over coffee, they waited for my reaction. I surprised both of us. I hope they're both okay, I said. And I meant it. Not because I wanted either of them back in my life, because bitterness had become heavier than the relationship itself. I was tired of carrying it. Months later, I went back to the gym because somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, I had discovered I actually liked working out. Nathan saw me near the front desk and gave me a quick smile. Heard things worked out, he said. They did. Good, take care, Claire. You too. And that was all it needed to be. After my workout, I drove home with the windows down despite the cool air. For the first time in months, I wasn't replaying old conversations in my head. I was simply driving home. The only thing that had changed was the person behind the steering wheel. That night, while cleaning out an old kitchen drawer, I found a folded receipt from years earlier. It was for the first coffee maker Ethan and I had bought together after he moved into the condo. For a moment, I simply stared at it. There was a time when I would have sat on the floor, cried over the memories, and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Instead, I smiled. I wasn't smiling because the relationship had failed. I was smiling because, despite everything, it had taught me something worth carrying forward. I folded the receipt one last time. Then I dropped it into the recycling bin. Throwing that receipt away wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting that I no longer needed to carry it. Months turned into almost a year. People occasionally asked whether I had started dating again. Sometimes I laughed and changed the subject. Sometimes I answered honestly. I'm not looking for someone to complete my life anymore. That confused people. So I explained. I already have one. Love no longer sounded like sacrifice to me. It no longer meant paying every bill while convincing myself gratitude would eventually arrive. It no longer meant apologizing because someone else refused to respect my boundaries. It certainly didn't mean shrinking until another person's comfort became more important than my own peace. If someone ever joined my life again, it would be because they added something beautiful to it. Not because I was willing to lose pieces of myself trying to keep them there. Looking back, I realized none of it really began in the courtroom. It began the day I stopped questioning my own instincts. Everything after that was simply the consequence of finally believing them. Closure never arrived all at once. It was hidden in ordinary moments. A new lock, an empty closet, a quiet night's sleep, and the strange realization that my home finally felt like mine again. That night, I locked my front door the same way I had hundreds of times before. The difference was simple. I no longer waited for the next lie, rehearsed imaginary arguments, or made myself smaller just to keep someone else comfortable. I was thinking about tomorrow. And for the first time in a long time, tomorrow felt like mine.